takes place between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. Events occur in real time.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's FTC Radio Live. It's Tuesday. Week 9 is in the books in the NFL. It's November 9th. This time ago, last year, there was some thing going on in the national news that I think was grabbing everyone's attention, John. I don't quite remember what it was. Oh, yeah, that's right. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers signed Antonio Brown, and obviously he became a big part of their Super Bowl run. No, of course, I'm talking about the election this time last year was obviously dominating the news headlines, and it seems like it was just yesterday, John.
It seems like it was yesterday, or sometimes feels like it was 10 years ago. And again, there's quite a bunch of people that are still trying to count ballots in certain states like Arizona or wherever else. So there are some people that think the election isn't over, although if you Google Joe Biden, he is the president of the United States. So I'll go with Google or Wikipedia on that one.
I should have gone with Google years ago, and I wouldn't be sitting here doing this right
That's
now.
True.
But
I think we all should have. Absolutely. Apple, Google, Facebook. We would have been rich men if we were at the forefront of that stuff.
Yeah, you live and you learn, right, John? On to the next one. No, obviously, last night was the conclusion of Week 9 in the NFL, which is crazy to think that. I know we do this every single year. Every year, it's the quickest year that we've ever experienced in the NFL. I get it. I understand it's cliche. We're contractually obligated to say these things every single season. But really, though, John, it feels like the season is just flying by. Like, I mean, I know we still have 8 games for most teams, even though we're 9 games into the season. It's great. We've seen some really good football for the most part. And for the most part, we really don't know and foresee a conclusion to the season like we have in some years where we kind of, are like, all right, this team's on on a march to the Super Bowl, or this team's set for this. We really don't have that, especially in the AFC, and we're gonna kind of talk about that a little bit here today. But it's exciting. It makes for fun football at this point on because no, as Bill Belichick says, you don't really know much about your team until around Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving's a couple weeks away, and that statement, John, seems to be holding fairly true for the New England Patriots because we are starting to figure out who they are. And I think we're going to have a far better idea in these next couple weeks exactly what type of team this is. So, a lot of stuff to talk about. I love it. I love football, John. I love football. I love it.
I do, but I also love basketball and baseball.
Yeah, sure.
All the other fun stuff. I know you're a big hockey guy, but right now this is football season. The World Series is over. The NBA is a month into the season, and teams are still trying to figure out who they are. But yeah, the AFC is just incredible when you have 12 teams that woke up this morning with 4 or 5 wins. 9 of them, I believe, had 10 teams have either 4 or 5 wins. That includes Indianapolis, which got off to a bad start, and I think has kind of righted the ship a little bit. It's the AFC is good luck trying to pick that one. I mean, one week you could be the number 1 seed, and the next week you can be out of playoff contention. Just look at the Cincinnati Bengals, right? 2 weeks ago at this time, we're like, wow, Cincinnati might be the best team in the AFC, and then 2 weeks later they're not on pace to be a playoff team. So the AFC is really obviously interesting. In the NFC, it seems like the tiers have been established a little bit more. In the entire sport, Ian, there's one team with 1 loss, and that's the Arizona Cardinals. And I don't know of anybody that's buying into the Cardinals being a favorite to win the Super Bowl, even though they've only lost 1 game, and it was a heartbreaking loss to the Packers a couple of Thursday nights ago. So this thing is wide open. It always is. I mean, we saw Tampa last year with 7-5, won its last 4 regular season games, and then went through the playoffs. That could happen again with some team out there. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, especially this week with the Patriots, because they're playing a Cleveland team that, had an impressive win at Cincinnati, and they've had their ups and downs as well. So that's a big game, obviously, because eventually we could be looking at tiebreakers between the Browns and Patriots. So a very, very big game on Sunday when the Patriots host the Browns.
Well, and you have, the Browns are in one of 2 divisions right now. that all 4 of their teams have at least 5 wins. And
Incredible.
which is, it's like, well, wait a minute, where are all these wins coming from? Then you look and you're like, oh, Jacksonville has 6 losses, Houston has 8 losses, Miami has 7. So, the bad teams in the AFC are really bad,
Mhm.
but the majority of these teams are actually pretty good. I mean, you talk about the Colts, and it's like, on any given Sunday, the Colts can beat probably just about any team in the league. But then they
Mhm.
could also lose to any team in the league, including the Jets, including a team like Houston, just based on what kind of Carson Wentz game we get. And generally, we've gotten some pretty good Carson Wentz games. Now, much like Matt Stafford, you're not going to completely change who you are. You're still going to have some of your more negative tendencies pop up here and there, and we've seen it with Stafford. We've seen it with Carson Wentz. Um, so again, the Colts, I think, can only go so far. But when it comes to what's happening during the regular season, I mean, that's a team that, again, who's going to sit there and say, "Oh, that's an easy win"?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
they lost an overtime game against the Tennessee Titans a couple weeks ago that they could have very easily
Mhm.
won. They gave away a game against Baltimore a few weeks before that. I mean, they could be 6-3 instead of 4-5. You could do this exercise with every team in the league. The Patriots could easily be 7-2, right? If they had been able to beat Miami and Dallas, or pick any teams that they lost to, that they were in those games and had every chance to win. So that's what we're at right now in the AFC. I mean, the two teams record-wise that are a little bit better than the rest are Baltimore and Tennessee. And Tennessee doesn't have its best player and may not have him for the rest of the season. And Derrick Henry. And Baltimore every week is just getting itself in 10, 14-point deficits and then asking Lamar Jackson to pull them out from peril. And normally he does that. So those are teams that have quite a few questions as well.
Well, and the funny thing is, you brought up, you mentioned the Patriots. It's, right now they're second in the division, but they may, I could easily sit there and say they're playing better than Buffalo is right now.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
and if, in the AFC, they're only second to Buffalo when it comes to point differential, which that's something that I do like to pay attention to, because again, that tells me a lot more about, how balanced your team is. If you're really good, your point differential is going to be very high. And for example, we look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this is something I'm going to ask you here in a little bit more detail in a minute. And I sit here and question how good they are at 5-3, and I sit there and I look and I'm like, oh wow, they're -8 in point differential, but they're 5-3. That's not good. That tells me that they're winning some pretty close games that maybe they shouldn't. And then you look around the league and you see the Houston Texans are -130, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense because they're a terrible team. So I look around the league and I say, okay, the AFC, you have the Bills at +117, which I do think and we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I think that obviously was greatly skewed by two very lopsided victories over the Dolphins and the Texans, I believe. And correct me if I'm wrong, I might have mixed up one of the teams there, but aside from that, there are the Patriots at +60. That's better than the Titans. It's better than the Colts. It's better than the Ravens, who are surprisingly
But
only at.
that number is also up there because of two lopsided wins over the Jets.
Oh,
So,
sure. Well, sure,
you
and
know,
but you also have to take into account also the tight game against Tampa Bay, where they held the Bucks under 20 points, and then you also take
oh,
into account. So
impressive game.
yeah, so
Absolutely. Yep.
I think that that's kind of a surprising thing, because then you look around the NFC and Tampa Bay is at was 77. Arizona's at 122. But then you only have the Rams at +65, and that's it. So, the Patriots in the AFC, there's, like I said, there's I can't even count that high, but there's so many teams with at least 5 wins in this conference. It's just a logjam right now of teams fighting for those playoff spots. And to me, I think most of these teams are fairly legitimate. Now, I guess that's something I'll ask you, and this will be a good transition into that, because I mentioned the Steelers before, and at 5-3, they're only behind Baltimore right now in the NFC or AFC North. We're probably pressing the pause button right now on the Cincinnati Bengals hype. Let's see what happens. It looks like they might be reverting back to bungle um, territory. We'll see. We'll see. I'm not, panicking quite yet, but I'm a little worried, John, based on what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, that they might be revealing their true selves. But
Mhm.
right now, 5-4.
Hoping
Cleveland.
that stripes. They're showing their stripes.
Yeah. It could be. Yeah. Tigers have changed their stripes, my
See that?
friend. So yeah, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, all have 5 wins in that division. Baltimore. I mean, I think there's questions about actually all those teams, to be honest with you, because we've seen some questionable play from Baltimore. Although I do think Baltimore's legit because of Lamar Jackson and everything because of that. But Pittsburgh, I already mentioned it, -8 in the point differential. Like, I just don't believe in this Pittsburgh Steelers team. And we talked about it a little bit uh, off the air. They should have just they would have been better off if Ben Roethlisberger just retired.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, you're just dragging it along. You're just extending it for no reason. They should have just bit the bullet, moved on, and that was that. I mean, I understand why it's Ben Roethlisberger, and he means quite a bit to that franchise, and rightfully so. But I mean, this is a guy who just doesn't have it, and certainly doesn't have it for any sort of extended period of time. There'll be flashes where he'll make a play here and there, but are you counting on Ben Roethlisberger to go toe to toe from quarter one to quarter four in a high pressure situation without making a mistake? No. Do you expect him to be able to stay relatively healthy into the playoffs if they make it? I don't. So to me, I think this Pittsburgh team is just, I don't know. I feel like this is like a 9-8 finish for them, type thing, or 8-9, something like that. Like hovering around 500, completely meaningless in terms of like you're not really getting a high draft pick, you're not really making the playoffs, you're just kind of in NFL purgatory essentially. Uh,
Yep. They have a really good defense, although last night they gave up
they've
24
always had a
last
real
night.
good defense, though.
They're
You know what
always
I mean?
gonna have a good
They've had that
defense.
for
Like, they
20
draft
plus years.
I can go back to my youth, the Steel Curtain in 1972. It was born. I mean, ever since then, I've always seen Pittsburgh with a really good
Yeah.
defense, physical, fast, able to create turnovers. I mean, they gave 27 last night, but 7 came on a muff punt that was returned for a touchdown. So that was a fumbled punt, which was returned for a touchdown. So they gave up 20 against not exactly the top tier offense of the Chicago Bears. They have a good defense. They seem to be getting their running game going somewhat with rookie Najee Harris. But yeah, I mean, how serious can you take a team that has a quarterback that looks like a shot fighter at this point and can't really deliver the ball more than 10 yards past the line of scrimmage? I don't really. Pittsburgh could be a pain in the butt. They could sneak in and maybe win one game, but I that would be their ceiling at most. If I was to bet today, I'd say they probably don't make it because, again, a very difficult schedule, and you're playing all these teams in your division again, and those are going to be difficult games to say the least.
Yeah, and like, look, that's the thing. I mean, you brought up the defense, and like, this is no. I do think they have a great defense. I mean, you talk about some of the players that they have on this defense and everything like that, but you know, again, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Offense wins championships. I don't care about. I mean, okay, I do care about defense. Let's make sure we're taking my words not as literally as I'm saying them, but for the most part, I couldn't care less about defense. Make sure that I have an elite offense and a pretty good defense because that's what wins in this league. So Pittsburgh can go out there and have a great defense, but that enigma offense, that terrible offense, that the ability to not be able to move the ball that they show so well at times, that's going to hurt their Pittsburgh's defense. And especially when you're struggling at the quarterback position where you're very limited, that's going to end up being an issue. And long term, like I mean, if you're going to ask me right now, playoffs or no playoffs, I gotta assume that Pittsburgh's just not going to end up being there at the end of the day, and it has nothing to do with their defense because it's still going to be a pretty elite unit. 169 points allowed in the conference, and that is third best in the conference behind Buffalo and Denver. So again, this team is, they don't give up a whole lot of points. Obviously, last night notwithstanding, they have a good unit. They have the ability to turn it over. They have elite players at every level, but they have a bad offense. So if you're going to tell me out of that division, let's say Baltimore wins that division. Of those 3 teams, John, which one would you put your money on? You had to choose one. Yeah, Sophie's choice. You have no other options. You have to choose one of those three in some sort of Squid Game like survivor pool. Like if you don't get this right, John, that's it. You're gone. You're done. You're eliminated. You're done forever. No one's ever going to hear from you again. Of those three teams, which one would you bet the house on to actually make the playoffs?
Oh, Cleveland,
Cleveland?
without question.
Okay.
Yeah, without question, it's the best roster by far.
Well,
In fact,
actually,
I
you're
think they
probably
have
the
the
wrong
best
person to
roster.
ask that because Cleveland was your Super
Yeah, I
Bowl
picked them
pick.
to win the Super Bowl, so I'm pretty stubborn when it comes to that. But look, they're a better team without OBJ. That's been proven last year. It's been proven this year. I think it'll be proven down the stretch. Although they have a very difficult schedule. Not that I trust Baker Mayfield much more than Ben Roethlisberger. He does have a little more athleticism at this point in his career than Ben Roethlisberger, but they have the best roster. I think they have the best roster in the AFC. I do have the question at quarterback, obviously, and that's a big question mark to have. I mean, if you put an elite quarterback on Cleveland, I think you have the best team in football. And it wouldn't have to be Rodgers or Brady, but someone up there. I mean, Dak Prescott on Cleveland or Russell Wilson on Cleveland or anyone else
Well,
at that level,
I
it would
think
be very difficult to beat because they've got talent all over the place.
well, I think we both agree that Baker's a guy that is good, but I've said it before. It's kind of like Jared Goff. You have to create offense for him.
Yeah.
He's not necessarily a offense creator, and that's not to say that he can't make plays and he can't scramble and do stuff like that. I'm talking about you know uh, play design. I mean, Jared Goff had great moments because of again talent around him, and I think the elite play design that they have. Uh, you can make the argument, John, that so is Patrick Mahomes. You have to scheme things open for him. Now, guys like Brady, Rodgers, and the elite quarterbacks that we've seen come through this league before, Dak Prescott, I believe, is one of them as well. So I'm glad you've mentioned him. Those are guys that can create offense themselves. And by that, I mean calling the right plays, diagnosing the defense, putting all their players in the right position to be able to succeed. And when you have a team that's ripe with talent, like Cleveland, like Tampa, those type of players are going to get the most out of their surroundings. It doesn't necessarily mean I mean, all we hear right now is how many elite weapons Tom Brady has. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski haven't played in a month. You know, like and they're still putting up 33 points a game. So the point is, certain quarterbacks can make that big of a difference. That's not to say Baker can't win games. That's not to say that Baker can't, he's a bust or anything like that. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying his ceiling is put him around some really good talent, put him in a good coaching situation, and create offense for him, and he will succeed. If you can't do that, then well, it's a little bit more hit or miss. And if I'm wrong down the road and he becomes a guy that I feel can do those things that Brady and Rodgers and some of the elite quarterbacks can do, then I'll be wrong. But right now, I don't see it. That's why I am not quite sold yet. Like, I don't know if this past week was a bit of a mirage when it comes to Cleveland. It seemed like kind of a bit of a perfect storm. Um, because they've really kind of struggled this year. The inconsistency is their biggest problem. It's like at one moment they look really good, other moments they kind of look like the same old Cleveland Browns, and you're like, all right, well, is this team really making that next step forward? Because like I believe very much in this team. I was like, well, you gotta, once they got over that Freddie Kitchens mistake and kind of evolved from that, they're like, all right, they're getting better. But this season they kind of either plateaued or just kind of leveled off. Well, the addition by subtraction thing does happen. Like I think there's validity in that. I mean, how can you sit there and say, how do you get rid of a talent like Odell and actually think you're better? Well, guess what? Odell can, despite how talented he is, can bring the entire team down. So, of course, that's a possibility. And what we saw last week was probably the best. But we're also looking at it as Cleveland Browns, but not ignoring the fact that, well, we've already mentioned the Bengals and how they seem to be regressing these last couple of weeks. So, what is it? Who are the Cleveland Browns? I'm not quite ready to make that definitive claim yet because I am still a little concerned without talent, excessive talent. Not that they don't. I mean, Nick Chubb is great. I mean, Jesus, Nick Chubb, come on now. They don't even have Kareem Hunt yet, back yet, and Nick Chubb just runs over anyone. But I'm not quite ready to sit there and say that Cleveland is a better team today without Odell Beckham Jr. Not quite. Not saying it's not possible. I'm just not quite there yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was proven last year and it was proven even early this year. So we'll see what happens with that. But again, Baker's best when he has a lead and he's comfortable, right? He's not a guy that can be put in an uncomfortable situation and flourish. The top quarterbacks can do that. They can come from behind. They can be put in really difficult situations. I mean, he had chances to win at Kansas City last year in the playoffs. Had, I believe, 3 opportunities to drive his team down the field for the game score, and he wasn't able to do that. So, but with the lead, he'll take care of the football. I think he's pretty well liked by his teammates. So I would think of those 3 teams that we're talking about that they have the highest ceiling because they just have more talent than Pittsburgh or Cincinnati. I mean, I like Joe Burrow better than Baker Mayfield and Ben Roethlisberger as a quarterback. And Burrow now, he's still prone to some turnovers. He's got a little Tony Romo in him where, he sometimes will push a little bit too far. But I think he coached that out of him. But I think he's a better quarterback than those 2 guys. But I just think the roster of Cleveland's is better. So I would say Baltimore and Cleveland will both make the playoffs if, we try to get to that magic number of 7.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I can see that. But, at the same time, you think, okay, well, I don't want to call it for the AFC East, but let's just say Buffalo holds on to the division. Let's just, give them the benefit of the doubt. They won the division last year. Let's just assume that they win. So Buffalo, Baltimore, Tennessee, and again, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt because they have won the division, but let's throw Kansas City in there. Although I don't actually, you know what? No, I don't want to. We'll leave it with the Chargers because I want to talk about Kansas City in this mix. So they're your 4 teams right now, division winners: Chargers, Titans, Ravens, Bills. I'm just basically taking it off the the top of the pile here, how the standings are. So all of a sudden, you have the Patriots, the Steelers, the Browns, the Bengals, the Colts, the Raiders, the Chiefs, and the Broncos. I should have been counting because that is quite a big number. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams fighting for 3 spots with 8 games left.
Yeah, because there's 12 teams right now that wake up this morning as playoff contenders.
Yep. And the others are just not. There's there's no gray area. There's no in between. You're either a playoff contender or you're vying for the number 1 overall pick. And Houston might be wrapping that up as we speak. The irony of it is, I don't even think they have a first round pick, do they?
No, they still have it.
They still have it. Okay. That's what I thought.
Last year, and I'm assuming by draft day they will have multiple first round picks for many years once they move on from Deshaun Watson, which I would assume they will do in the off season.
The irony. Well, maybe not the irony, but what's going to be funny is 2 teams taking 2 complete opposite approaches will both not win a Super Bowl this year. The Rams and the Texans. One team doesn't want draft picks. The other one is trying to accumulate them, and neither of which will win a Super Bowl this year. So that's a little prediction for a little foreshadowing, I guess, if you take my word as scripture. But anyways, so yeah, I mean, you're looking at a logjam of 3 teams. And actually, real quick, John, we're gonna implement a little technical fix here during our live show. I'm gonna hang up on you and call you back because I think there's a little hiccup with your audio. I'm only getting it in one ear, so I want to make sure everyone out there is listening. So I'm gonna yap, call you, and then you'll get back on and we'll be good to go.
I'll know what to do.
Yeah, you'll know what to do. You're a pro. So anyways, this AFC logjam, it's going to be tough. Like, how do you figure which 3 teams are going to ultimately end up with those 3 playoff spots? Now, I sit here and say, I almost want to sit there and say that the Patriots are well on their way to the playoffs. And a quick mic check, John, are you back with us?
I'm with you.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. See, I love hearing your voice, John, and it kills me to only have to hear it in one ear. So I had to get it fixed. And of course, the folks out there listening should better hear you now. I don't know what happened there, but as soon as you chimed in on that, one of those last recent comments. The audio was off just a little bit, but no. So these 8 teams that we're looking at the Patriots. Like I said, I think they have, of those teams that I've mentioned, I think they're playing the best might not be the right word for it. I think they're playing the safest football, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. And in that, it's not that they're not aggressive, it's not that they're overly conservative, it's that they're not turning the ball over as much. I mean, again, last week they had a couple hiccups there with Mac Jones with the interception and the fumble. Um, but they're in pretty much every game. They haven't really been non-competitive. I think the one game we talked about was that Saints game where they were really just kind of not in it. Uh, and I think they're the one team you can sit out of and look at all those teams and say, yeah, I think they're trending up.
Mhm.
Because I look at the Raiders, I'm like, they're kind of trending down. The Chargers, certainly. I mean, they they kind of, they're bleeding clotted a little bit there, but they're still, in a position that isn't necessarily strong. Kansas City again, um, coming off what back to back wins, but I mean, it's the most unconvincing back-to-back wins I think I've ever seen from any team in the history of the NFL. And then again, the Steelers we've already talked about. The Browns, might be that next other team that you're like, okay, yeah, that's a team that looks like it's trending in the right direction. But I need to see it for another week. I want to say so. Right now, I'm sitting here saying, outside of the division, Patriots might be the hottest team in the AFC. And really, if you think about it, again, if you're going to ask me today who's going to win this division, I mean, maybe again it's a little bit of a homer pick, but the way both teams are playing, give me the Patriots because right now I think the Bills, and this is something that doesn't necessarily get mentioned or whatever, but I think the Bills might start to feel the pressure a little bit because let me ask you, John, do you think that through 8 or 9 games of the season, do you think that they thought it would be in a win tie the New England Patriots for the division lead at this point?
I don't think 2 or 3 weeks ago they even thought that,
Yeah.
let alone at the beginning of the season, right? Because they got off to a really good start. Uh, then they went into Kansas City and manhandled the Chiefs. And whether like the Chiefs or not, that was a one-sided game. I mean, it was a
Mhm.
thorough beatdown. And at that point, you're like, Buffalo's the best team in the AFC. Then they go to Tennessee, and Josh Allen isn't able to get into the end zone. That was a tough loss. But then they were life and death with Miami, which
Mhm.
no good team should be in that situation, especially at this point in the season when Miami looks like they're just throwing in the towel. And then to lose at Jacksonville, that's when you're like, okay, there's some serious issues with this team offensively. I mean, I think the defense is still pretty good. They only gave up 9 points last week. It's the offense that's
But
struggling. Yeah,
defense doesn't matter.
no. Well, I mean,
I know.
if they didn't give up any
I'm just
points, they would've won
recalling
the
an
game.
earlier conversation. That's all.
Right. Oh yeah, I know. I think it matters some. I mean,
Oh, of course it does. Of course it
it
does.
puts less pressure on your offense to be good than have to be supernatural. So yeah, no, I think we do have a divisional race going on right now because let's not forget the Bills still have to play the Buccaneers and the Patriots
Mhm.
already have that game out of the way. So that's one scheduling advantage for the Patriots. They get to play Buffalo twice. If they can split those games, now it continues on and you're kind of kicking the can down the road. Yeah, I would say if you're going to say that the way I look at it is I think if I'm making my playoff predictions right now, it's Buffalo and the Patriots will both make it. Baltimore and Cleveland will both make it. I think Tennessee obviously wins the South even without Derrick Henry. And then I'll say the Chargers and Chiefs both make it out of the West. That's my guess right now. That could change next week when
Yeah.
one team comes out and looks much better than we expect, or one team looks much worse than we expect. Indianapolis is kind of that weird team in there because I'm always waiting for them to put something together, and then Carson Wentz has a way of derailing that, like he did against Tennessee in that really heartbreaking loss. But that's who I would say with the 7 teams are. And look, the Patriots are playing excellent football right now. They're doing everything you need to do. The defense has been good. The offense, they're running the football, which is what we expected them to do all year, right?
Mhm.
So that takes some pressure off of Mac Jones. You get to get into play action, which I think he's really good at. The kicker is pretty much a guarantee. And if you're going to be playing in these games where it comes down to the kicker, you feel pretty good with Nick Folk. I know he missed one last week, but that was late in the game when it was.
Yeah, I blame the graphic department on that game because they immediately right before it they said, "Oh, he's hit like 37 straight inside the foot." And I'm just like, "Oh, of course." And then that thing just went whoop.
Yeah, it was like Santos last night. It hit 40 straight field goals, and then they put him out there for a 65-yarder to win the game, and he come up short. I mean, how much can you blame the field goal kicker on that one?
Think about that for a minute. How Nick Folk was just an afterthought. And just an emergency replacement. And all of a sudden, he set the record earlier this season for consecutive field goals made, surpassing Stephen Gostkowski and Adam Vinatieri, two pretty good kickers in their own right, of course. And, his overall streak was right in the midst of a league record in terms of consecutive field goals. Now, he was a little off from that number. I can't remember what the exact top number was, but he's been as solid as you can get, especially for a team that for a couple of years was really dealing with some shakiness from the kickers because, well, Stephen Gostkowski was dealing with a bunch of injuries. And as we see now, I mean, he's not in the league. So, those injuries obviously took a toll on him. So, but fortunately for the Patriots, they're in a position where they have a strong kicker. Again, I think you can trust the coaching staff to make the right decisions more often than not in game. And like I said, I mean, you're getting pretty good quarterback play from a rookie, and that's mostly the most important part because you talk about how great the Bills defense was. Well, they were great. They held Jacksonville to 9 points. I don't care what team you are. If you hold a team to 9 points, that's pretty damn good. And they lost because they didn't have any offense. So your defense can do great. I mean, you can shut out an opponent, but you're not going to win unless you score points. So, to me, I look at this Buffalo team and I'm like, well, I think we saw the worst of Allen the first two seasons. We may have seen the best of the best of the best of him last season, and he's going to fall somewhere in between. And is that good enough for the Bills to overcome some of these other teams? I don't know. Maybe a few years ago when their defense was a little better than what it was now. I mean, it's still really good now, but you know what I mean? A few years back when it was like suffocatingly elite, maybe they could have gotten away with some subpar quarterback play, but I don't think that they can now because with subpar quarterback play, you're not producing any points at all. And if you're Buffalo, that doesn't bode too well. That doesn't bode too well.
No, and he's turning the ball over. He's making mistakes, which he's prone to do. I mean, that's kind of in him. You have to coach that out of him as much as you can. So yeah, I mean, I think he's still a very good quarterback, but the elite guys, they prove to me year in and year out that they're the elite guys. Like we can go back and recall games that they played several years ago and say, remember the time so-and-so did this back in 2013. And that's when you can say, okay, this guy has a history of being an elite quarterback. Now, we sound like two quarterback snobs here because the two names that will always come up will be Brady and Rodgers. I also always put Russell Wilson in there. I mean, because I know as a Packers guy, I sound like I'm the defensive coordinator of the Packers, but I've gone up against Russell Wilson enough that he still scares me somewhat because, he the play never ends with him. He always can extend the play, sometimes to his own detriment, and it leads to a lot of sacks. But I always put him up there because the man does have a Super Bowl win and went to another one and has been in a top 5 or 6 quarterback for nearly a decade now. So he's another guy. But these young guys, you see moments when you go, wow, they're really good. And then you have to hold back a little bit and say, okay, they're really good, but they're also prone to some downs. And, as time goes on, we'll see more about what these guys are all about, whether it's Mahomes, Herbert, Josh Allen, even Dak to some degree. I think that we'll get a better idea of what these guys are about as we watch their careers unfold. Let's not all put them in Canton right away.
There we go. Should probably unmute my mic when I want to talk. Yeah,
that usually works.
Yeah, and that's really the thing because that's how we get to this mess of a quarterback discussion is having no earthly idea how to evaluate these guys early on. I mean, we're seeing it with Patrick Mahomes now, where I mean, some of these guys, national analysis out here, have no idea what to do now with themselves. How do you figure out what's happening with all this stuff? They should have been listening to me the whole time, John. Let's be honest. They should have been listening to me, and they would have understood and been able to cope what's happening right now. But speaking of quarterbacks,
I
though, and
want you as my doctor because I'll go to you, and before there's any symptoms, you'll let me know that there's a problem and we can rectify it earlier
that's
than just an average doctor.
see, but here's the thing, though, symptoms have to exist because I saw the symptoms. I maybe it was some special glasses that I had on. Maybe it was just this instinct or ability that I have. But there were symptoms there. There were symptoms there, and I diagnosed them. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't obvious to everyone. So, but I do appreciate you trusting me with your health. It's almost like Aaron Rodgers trusting Joe Rogan. Really,
True.
the difference
Very
really
true.
isn't
Glad
that
to-
much
I'm
different
glad
at
to know
all.
that he now goes to Joe Rogan when he needs health tips.
Yeah.
I'm much more reassured that he's not wearing a tinfoil hat at this point.
Exactly.
Did you see the SNL skit?
Yeah, I did.
Oh.
It gave me a little bit of a chuckle because it was relevant to what we do. I'm one of those SNL hasn't been funny in years, people. So
Oh, you're the old guy?
yeah, yeah,
I thought it was an okay skit. I mean, I still think the Trump part of it was better, and I think the best person on the skit, and again, I don't even know who the people are on SNL anymore. I sound like a real old guy, but whoever was doing Judge Janine Pirro was perfect. That was
yeah.
exactly Judge Pirro.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm like the mid '90s. That's kind of I'm lost in that era.
I'm even back.
Yeah. I was gonna say you're a little
Where's
bit.
Dan Aykroyd? Where's Bill Murray?
Oh, you're not gonna go all the way back to Belushi.
Oh Jesus, I know, huh?
But yeah. So, anyways, we only got a few minutes left, and we do want to give our quarterback power rankings. We haven't really done that over the last few weeks or so because, well, no, we've missed some shows because I haven't been here, and this is a good time to do it now that we're halfway through the season. So, if you haven't been here when we've done it before, this is what we do. We just power rank our 5 quarterbacks in this league, and we start with number 5 and work our way down. So, um, my number 5, John, is your guy, your new guy, Mr. Justin Herbert. Um,
Okay.
He's, obviously he struggled there a little bit. He had a couple, just, stretch against the Patriots, which was bad. But, for the most part, he's still playing at a fairly high, fairly elite um, level. It's been a little bit of a mess with some of these quarterbacks because as great as a bunch of them were playing earlier in the season, it's gotten a little bit muddy, especially this past week because there was a lot of really great quarterbacks, Dak Prescott, for example, that just didn't play great. So it's kind of hard to sit there and be like, okay, wait, how do I look at them now? But so, I kind of got to, cut him a little bit of slack and just say, you know what, for the most part, through 8 games, he's playing. I think he's progressing nicely based on what we saw last year, and I think he's playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the league right now. So give me your guy, Justin.
Okay, I've got Kyla Murray at number 5. Didn't play that great against the Packers in that big showdown a week and a half ago, and he didn't play last week, and Arizona still was able to win. He's still an MVP candidate. My only issues with Kyler, the size obviously is an issue, and sometimes he's not as accurate as I would like. And again, I think that he's still an evolving player, but I got him at number 5. Look, they're the only team with only one loss, and he's a big reason why. So I have him at number 5.
Number 4 for me is Dak Prescott. Like I said, he didn't really have a great game this past week, but again, I mean, there's a lot of quarterbacks on this list that have had a bad game or two. So I'm not going to necessarily hold it against him. And again, for the most part, he's right in that MVP conversation, maybe on that second tier, but he's there. So Dak Prescott, numero 4 for me.
Yeah, matches his uniform number. Yeah, I have him at number 4 as well. I think he's playing really well. That game just got out of hand from the Cowboys pretty early. Some questionable coaching decisions by Mike McCarthy. There's a surprise. And Denver just ran the ball down their throat. And when you're able to do that, it puts the other quarterback on the sideline for a long period of time. I think Dallas had the ball for 19 of 60 minutes. You can't really do much. You only have the ball for that short period of time, and you're constantly chasing a big deficit. I have Dak at number 4. He's obviously an elite quarterback.
Yeah, number 3 for me is Kyler. Again, despite missing this past week, and obviously, like you mentioned, having a pedestrian game the week before, he's still again. The problem with these debates and these discussions, awards, going week for week, it's such a what have you done for me lately, and it's such a you don't really have that long of a memory when it comes to these discussions, and that will be the case when we talk about number 1 and 2 here in a minute. But yeah, so to me, I'm looking at the whole body of work and saying that right now, at this point, Kyla Murray is so right up there. So give me him at number 3.
I have my man Aaron Rodgers at number 3. I'm still sore at him for, you know, doing what he did and saying what he said over the last week, but he's still playing at a pretty high level. I mean, his previous 7 games before the game he missed in Kansas City, 17 touchdowns, 1 interception. He had a disastrous game against New Orleans. We know that, but, you know, that can't happen, but he's still playing at a fairly high level and gives them a chance. And then you saw how much he means to the team when Jordan Love was in there. They scored 7 points against a not real good defense in Kansas City. So I got Rodgers at number 3.
Yeah, I was actually, you know what, I had to take him off the list. I mean, you know,
You punished him.
I did, and look, I mean, I don't, like, he's had a good season, no doubt about it, and I think we all understand the importance and everything of it, but it wasn't like, you know, this wasn't him last year, you know what I'm saying, where he
No.
was, you know, lapping the field numbers-wise as well. So, you know, for me, it's like this isn't necessarily all about missing the game. It's just that, like, when push comes to shove, you know, there's just other quarterbacks that have, you know, produced at a higher level at this point, and that's nothing to take away from him. So it was tough for me to find a spot for him on this top 5 list because number 2 for me is Lamar Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, again, I kind of alluded to this, and we're getting this conversation now about, oh, this is Lamar, you know, Lamar Jackson, he's the MVP favorite. And I'm like, look, he is right there in the conversation. Don't get me wrong, but this conversation is so, like I said, what has happened most recently. It's recency bias epitomized because, again, I mean, Lamar Jackson's having a great, nice little run, but there were times early in the season where he didn't play that great at all. And, you know, that's kind of been forgotten where I believe that, yeah, there's been some, you know, hiccups along the way, but Tom has been the most efficient, consistent quarterback from start to finish since week 1 than all of these guys. So to me, I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, well, to me, I still have Brady, and despite him not playing um, this past week, I think his stock kind of improved a little bit in that MVP race. But you know, that's not to take anything away from Lamar. I do think that he is really a big part, or one of the only parts, as to why this Baltimore team is at 6-2. But uh, as we know, John, this award isn't, it isn't exactly how it's defined. Like, I saw people make the argument that, oh, you know, Lamar is obviously the most valuable, and I'm like, no. Let's back the truck up a little bit, because if you were going to make a case for making the award the actual most valuable player and not necessarily the highest or best statistical quarterback, then Tom Brady should have won the award last year, because no one in their right mind can convince me otherwise that a quarterback goes to a team that was 7-9 and hadn't won a playoff game since 2002 and immediately turns them into a Super Bowl champion. I'd say that's the most valuable, but we know, John, that's not the award. You know what I'm saying? Like, we understand that. That's not how the award's viewed. I just saw some people try to make that case. And I'm like, no, 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 no. We're not doing it this year. If you weren't going to do it last year, we're not going to do it this year. But again, that's not to take anything away from Lamar Jackson. I think he's played great. I think he's going to continue to play great. I just don't think he's playing the greatest. So take it away, John.
Yeah, I've got Lamar number 2 and Brady number 1. I'm right there with you. I mean, Brady's played 8 games this year. They're 6-2. The games that Tampa lost, he still threw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns in each game. I mean, that's not on the quarterback. His defense was eviscerated in those 2 games against New Orleans, believe it or not, with Trevor Siemian playing most of the game at quarterback, and then, you know, earlier in the year against the Rams when Stafford had maybe his best game of his career. So, no, Brady's the MVP of the league right now without question, which would just be an incredible story to do it at 44 years old, the year after winning a Super Bowl, which he did that before. In 2016, they won the Super Bowl, and then he won the MVP the following year. So that's just
I'm actually kind of glad you
kind of crazy.
I'm actually kind of glad you mentioned 2016.
Because most guys rest on their laurels. I mean, they kind of, okay, won the Super Bowl, so I don't have anything to prove, and yet he comes back and wins an MVP. And he could have been the MVP in 16 as well. He missed the fourth game.
That's exactly what I was getting to,
but
because
he lost one game that year, right? I mean,
he was the best player the second he stepped on the field and returned. Like, this isn't taking anything away from Matt Ryan. This isn't, trying to downplay this great, because he had a really great season. And of course, Brady's numbers aren't going to be necessarily there, but there was no player that was better at the game of football during that start to finish. I mean, that tour de force. I mean, it doesn't get talked about it enough. Just the absolute tear.
Well, because Tom Brady doesn't get talked about enough. That's true.
Yeah. Well,
I want to make sure that.
Well, that's why I'm trying to do my part, John. I'm sacrificing and doing my part and talking about him enough, so we make sure that's enough.
No, he was sensational that year. He could have very easily been the MVP. Look, I mean, he could have 7 of these things, similar to the way LeBron probably could have 7 MVPs in the NBA. It's almost to the point where it's like, yeah, we kind of know he's the MVP, but there's some other interesting story elsewhere.
Well, that's what I think. That's what I think people are trying to do, and it's been like this for the last few weeks. They're trying to do with Tom Brady, because like they're just like, I think they're starting to see the writing on the wall that at this point it's his to lose. Like, there's really I don't know if there's anything that any other quarterback at this point can do. I know Nick Wright was like, well, Patrick, no, forget about Patrick Mahomes. Okay, he is nowhere close to this conversation of MVP quarterback or MVP at all. So, take those glasses off. So to me, it's just at this point, status quo for Tom Brady. And that's the easiest thing in the world for him to accomplish. Just keep doing what he's doing. Because right now we've seen it through 8 games. I mean, he's all he's got to do is do what he's doing. And that seems obvious and simple, but like the reality of it is it's not necessarily that obvious and simple, or not necessarily that simple for everyone. For Tom, I'm sitting here saying, like, for another 9 games, yeah, this guy's on pace to break the passing yards record. And I almost kind of hope he does it in week 16, so we won't get the, oh, well, there was an extra game. Well, I just want him to break it, in the 16th game of the season. And he may very well. And if that's the case, good guy. I mean, he may win another unanimous MVP award.
Yeah, I think it'd be tough to pull off the unanimous MVP, only because other quarterbacks having good years. That's a tough one to pull off. But no, I think he's the favorite. In fact, the betting sites have him as the favorite right now. Yeah. Somehow Josh Allen's still in contention above other quarterbacks. Is mind blowing. Maybe because he was the favorite for so long that it's tough to take the guy who was the favorite for several weeks, and even with an off week and a disastrous loss at Jacksonville, he can only go back so far because there's still a lot of money on him. You see what I'm saying? I mean, numbers can only move so much. I think he's the MVP of the league right now, absolutely, and I think they're the team to beat in the NFC. And again, I wouldn't be shocked if we don't have a rematch of Green Bay, Tampa Bay in the NFC Championship game, because I think the Green Bay defense is better than it was last year, and I think that gives them a real chance. And they're going to win that division because the Vikings and Bears can't get out of their own way. So we could have a rematch in the NFC, which would be fun, and hopefully with a different result. I know you want the same result as last year. I don't, but
just like you said earlier, I'm just diagnosing the symptoms, and the symptoms to me tell me, as great as Green Bay is, it's just a terrible matchup for them against the Buccaneers, and I don't like. That's the thing. I don't see it changing. So to me, it's like I'd welcome a Packers Buccaneers matchup, because that would be my lock of the week. And again, it's nothing against Green Bay. It's just sometimes you have 2 teams that just match up. Or they could be 2 great teams, but just one team, it's just a terrible matchup for them. And I think that's the case with the Packers. So if you're the Packers, you better hope you don't see Green Bay, because they can beat, I think, any other.
You want to see Dallas. Own Dallas. Yeah, I mean, as much as Rodgers talks about owning Chicago, he really owns Dallas. He won his 1 Super Bowl at Dallas, and has eliminated the Cowboys in the playoffs twice. I think he'd be fine against the Rams. I think one thing that Green Bay could have going forward is they change defensive coordinators. And look, Joe Barry is not Rex Ryan as a defensive coordinator, but he's a better defensive coordinator than Mike Pettin. So I would say that gives them at least a fighting chance, because they really couldn't get off the field against Tampa Bay, although they did create turnovers in that NFC Championship game, and Rodgers didn't take advantage of it. So he's got to be better, obviously. But I could see that happening because Matt Stafford, Dallas, Arizona. I mean, we still trust those teams, winning a couple of games because there's only one team that's going to get a bye, and you're going to have to win at some point on the road, and it's not easy to get to the Super Bowl, and it's made even more difficult with that extra team and with only one team getting a bye. So this is going to be a fun final 2 months, though, Ian, because the AFC is just, so unpredictable, and teams they've got their flaws, but they also have some good parts of it, and it could shake out that the Patriots could get back to the Super Bowl. I mean, Ryan Clark said that yesterday on Get Up. He says that somehow the AFC is going to go through Foxborough.
Patriots, Buccaneers, Super Bowl 56. Book it.
That would be interesting.
Book it.
Now, that would be interesting.
I think I would have some sort of internal crisis of epic proportions, because of course I would root for the Patriots to win the Super Bowl, but I don't know how I would handle rooting against Tom Brady in a Super Bowl.
You may need exorcism after that.
Yeah, that might be webcam streaming worthy of an event.
Sure.
But, we'll cross that bridge if and when we get there. But for now, we're gonna have to cross the bridge of conclusion here, because our show is over and we're gonna have to say goodbye for the day, and let you know that we will be back later in the week. So everyone, have a great day. Have a great Tuesday. Enjoy your your week, your job, whatever you're doing, and we'll talk to you soon.